Again, on behalf of the agency, if you were not here yesterday with us, I want to thank and welcome everyone for being here. This is a very exciting day for us. To me, this is the official kickoff of our assessment cycle. We worked very hard since last year to show you all the enhancements we're proud of throughout the day. But before we get into it, I want to make sure that we give some time to introduce all the hardworking people that are here and to make this possible. So I want to start first with my colleagues from the Texas Education Agency that are sitting in the back. We have our representatives for performance reporting. Please raise your hands if there you are. We also have our assessment colleagues. Please raise your hand if you are from the Student Assessment Division. Fantastic. And of course, we have our partners. We have ETS. Please raise or stand up. There's a great Lauren and team. And our Pearson friends, Amanda and team. We have a lot of ground to cover today. And if you were here yesterday on our optional day, hopefully you had a little taste of how we are switching the dynamic for this training a little bit. And the great Julie Guthrie, my partner in crime. Give a round of applause, come on. See, now you have to come here. So anyway, we want to make sure that we improve how we are delivering assessment information, especially updates to you. And a testament to that is how we reorganize this training for this couple of days. Ray Gross back there from ETS did us a huge favor of requesting sending a survey a few months back, trying to find all the areas where you wanted to get additional training. We had a very successful very successful day yesterday. We had multiple sessions, and hopefully we were able to assist you in understanding better how to navigate through our sometimes complex management systems. And for today, within the same line of thought, we are very excited to have a different approach to how we deliver information. We have a new section, what we're calling the Test Administrator, Call Drivers, and Frequently Asked Questions. So in the past, because I've been here for a while, we used to come here and spend the whole day delivering a bunch of information that by after lunch, most of you are falling asleep, and you call later during the year and ask me, hey, what were you saying the other day? So this time, what we did is we asked our partners, Pearson and ETS, to look back through their customer service rosters and trying to find the most common areas where you are having to spend time trying to figure out the answer to a problem or of an issue. And with that, we're very proud to introduce this new section when we're gonna go over the top 10 call drivers. We put them in different buckets, from reportings, from registrations, and we're going to show you, first of all, what is the most common issue regarding that particular topic, what is the right way to solve it, and what is more important to me, what is not the best way to solve it, because it can create other problems down the road. At the same time, this is, if you all received it yesterday, it's a very lengthy PowerPoint. It's like 320 so slides. So it will be silly to post this and expect anyone to read it unless they're having some sleeping problems. So what we're going to do is each one of those 4 sections is going to be recorded. It's also going to be posted separately alongside with the slide deck. And I'm very excited to announce that the Student Assessment Division is going to have its own playlist from now on the TEA main YouTube page. So this is the first time we're going to post directly into YouTube our trainings that are recorded. And I'm very hopeful that in the future it's going to become a new way to communicate information directly to you. Nothing, really? Okay, hey. Again, in this business, there's always trade-offs, right? Because we introduced this new section that I'm very excited, we still have to deliver all the information you need. So it will be impossible to meaningfully go through every one of the 329 slides throughout one day of work. So lucky for us, this is a year with not many significant updates to the program. So there's several information that we are not going to cover in depth. We just have the slides and the text here because I've heard your request that you want to have this information so you can use the slides within your own trainings. But unless it's a significant update or something that needs a reminder, we're probably not going to cover it today, okay? But the information is still here so you can consume it at any time. Speaking of improving how we do things, we're very excited to have a little more of an interactive experience this year. So now that you all hopefully are logged into the Wi-Fi, if you don't mind on your devices, go to menti.com. Don't put the code yet, because I didn't want to make the test live, so we don't get ahead of the game. But throughout the day, we're going to see this check-in logo on different slides. And when we get to that point, we're going to switch to our menti.com page so we can do a quick check for understanding to make sure that we all following along and that our delivery is clear enough to ask you questions about it. All right, so before I get started with the actual enhancements for this day, I want to spend a little time talking about last year. Because last year was a great year. Was a year of fundamental change. We changed how we align our assessment calendar with the school calendar. We had major changes, especially in how we approach the participation counts for STAR. It was a great year. We administered close to 14 million tests between all of our programs, believe it or not. That's not an easy task. And I'm going to call it a very successful year. There was a lot of highs, there were many highs. There were a few opportunities for us to learn and improve our processes, and that's what we're hoping to develop today, what we learned from that experience. But the key, just like Tyson said, was that we did it together. You had to put up with me last year. It was my first year at this role. Even though I've been in assessment for a while, I was mainly building tests, not dealing with administration. And the one thing that is super clear to me is that the only way that we can administer 14 million tests successfully is that we have a strong partnership between the agency, our vendors, and the practitioners. Because like Tyson said earlier, we work for you. So I think it's fair to say that I've spoken on the phone with pretty much everybody here many times. And usually when you call, I try to assist you, but I also give you homework, right? Many times when Tyson has a great idea, I try to get feedback from the field. So many of you have participated on our focus groups. Many of you are on our advisory groups, district working group or accessibility working group. And we even, every time we're making an improvement on any system, we try to put together a small group to give us feedback before we release any new initiative. Many of the people here in this room have participated, and I want to thank you for it. Like I mentioned, this list, we can basically separate them into two buckets, right? There are few updates that are a result of changes in requirements, especially that Monday testing. But most of the other, if not all of the others, are a direct result of the conversations we had and the need to improve our processes that came out from the conversations that I had directly with you. So I want to thank you for that because, again, like you heard me say, I believe that this is our program and it's only going to get better if we fix it together. So let's get started. For this year, again, these are all the major updates. There are a few more other enhancements that are not on this list, but we're going to cover them throughout the day. The first one is the participation counts. Last year, when I joined the administration team, we were also releasing a new approach on how we were going to request participation counts for paper materials. You were very generous with your feedback, and I want to thank you for that. So we went back to the drawing board, and we have now a new way to approach participation counts. We are going to base them on your initial registration. So there's one less step for you. I'm going to let my colleagues, whenever they get to the sections, to give you more details on how it's going to work out. But I feel that it's a very good example of how the best way to design any enhancements is for the three of us, vendor, agency, and coordinators to work together. Another change that we're making to standardize our processes a little more, for now on, all forms for a STAR paper will have a form number. It was getting confusing to read different directions. When you have different titles, there's a field, there's not a form field. So we're trying to make it as standard and easy as possible for you and your coordinators. We're going to cover all the requirement changes. One of them is going to be a change on how we approach substitute assessments, and that also is going to result in no longer having a substitute bubble or answer documents. Testing calendar updates. I'm going to spend some time when I get to my slide, because as you know, it's been a very challenging year, lots of opportunities to improve how we approach our scheduling of tests. We also have a new form. Actually, it's not a new form. We're bringing back the old form to request changes when you have a conflict scheduling any test that has a writing component. And we're very excited to announce a new form of communication. Soon we will be launching our help desk. If you're familiar with some other divisions within the agency, they have a customer service help desk system. We are going to launch ours this year very, very soon. Of course, the district and campus coordinator resources, we have made many improvements, all of them based on your feedback. We have added a new webinar directed to just the technology officers in your district. There was clearly a need to reach out to the technology staff at districts to make sure that we can have even a better online testing experience this year. We have made some policy changes too. We try to clean up a little bit how we were approaching the accessibility policy for LPAC committees. When I get to the accessibility section, we're going to get in depth of what was the thinking, the logic behind that change. The TELPAS programs have several updates. Again, you have a whole section on TELPAS. Just likewise for Star Alternate 2, there were some opportunities to learn last year, and I think you're going to be happy to hear what our reaction to that is. And finally, Julie is going to cover some improvements we're doing to the test security oaths process. So I'm going to start with my section then. And I want to preface this. On the 4 sections that we're going to post individually, you're going to see some repetition. I get it. It's not a mistake. It's on purpose, because what I want you to do is when you go back and train your staff, or you're trying to remember something, so that you don't have to watch the whole thing again, you can consume the video and the slides for each individual section in any order that you see fit. But to make sense, there's some information that has to be duplicated between sections. Does that make sense? Awesome. So the biggest change on my end is how we are approaching participation counts. Like I said, we're doing away with submitting your paper material counts. You no longer see that on the calendar of events. If you were here yesterday, Ray Gross did a very good job walking us through the process, and we're going to do that again today at the end of the day. But basically, we're using your initial registration. We added a new field, so you can tell us what kind of materials you're going to need, and then that's how we're going to produce your initial order of materials. All STAR forms will have now, the booklets will have a form number, even if there's only one form, and the answer documents will have a form number field. Now, there is one exception. There's always needs to be an exception, and that is the Braille answer document and the paper with embedded support documents. They have their own answer document, so there was not a need to do this, because they also have their own directions. However, for every, I guess the best way to put it, for every test where the test administrator is going to use the general test administrator manual, you're going to find a form number field. So there's no longer the problem of remembering, when do I need to mark a form number, or when do I don't? Okay? As I mentioned, the answer documents also no longer have a substitute assessment bubble. And I'm going to let Julie explain all those details when we get to her section. She's very good at explaining all those rules. This is what I want to spend some time, the calendar. There were several changes to the calendar this year, right? The first came from legislation. As you know, we have now a new requirement not to schedule assessments on the first instructional day. Julie is working very hard on a rule that will determine that as Monday for us. And there are going to be, since that happens, there's going to be some additional information and some revisions we've made, right? The first one, as you know, for grade 8, it was impossible to, it was not impossible, but it was very difficult to schedule all the required tests within 1 week, because remember, for grade 8 May, if a student needed 4 tests, that means that they needed science, social studies, but also to retake math and reading. Well, those are your most vulnerable students, so 4 tests in a row was too much. So we partnered with our TSNAP colleagues, and we asked you to help us choose what was the best case scenario. And there was not an easy answer. They were all tricky, and they will all have some issues that needed to be solved around. So we decided to move science and social studies to the week before, right? To May 7 and May 8. Unfortunately, we're still trying to solve the online component of that. But thanks to our partners, we did. So I'm happy to announce, and you've probably seen it already, that the calendars have been modified, and on May 7 and May 8, you will be able to administer the online test along with your paper test. Nothing. Thank you. Also, another clarification around Monday testing. Summer, it's always a challenge, right? Even before this Monday, no testing on Mondays was still a challenge. So we got some feedback from internal departments at TEA, from some of you, and our recommendation now is for the summer, if the student who has to take the test is no longer receiving instruction, you are allowed to use that Monday to schedule a test. But here's a caveat though. That does not apply automatically for English 1 or English 2. Because as I mentioned earlier, every test that has a writing component must be administered on our scheduled day. I understand there's always going to be conflict, but if you have a conflict, you need to submit a date change request form. This is on our DCCR under start scheduling. Be happy to show you later. In the past couple of years, it's been evident that we can't catch up with social media. So allowing districts to administer those tests earlier created a bunch of security concerns that it's almost impossible to get a hold of. So we're trying to restrict as much as we can for those prompts to be out so students can take it before the rest of the groups, because believe me, they're going to find out the prompt and there's a security concern. And the last thing I want to do is having to recommend an invalidation of a test because of that. That's the reason that we're restricting changing the dates for writing tests. But I get it, there's always going to be conflict. So what we ask you is submit a form, we'll analyze your conflict together, and we see if we can find a resolution that doesn't require necessarily changing the date too much, okay? And this one is a great update, and I'm gonna look at Whitney because that was all her. The calendar of events. How many of you have seen the new interactive calendar of events on the DCCR? How good is that? Come on. It's now color-coded. Are you kidding me? Calendar of events. We also, and I think it'll be easier for me to show than to tell, we work very hard on adding as much information as you can. Unfortunately, even though it's a big poster, the real estate is limited and we can't put an explanation for everything. But if you use your DCCR and you open your calendar of events, which is taking forever now, and you hover over, you don't hover over, you hover. That's my ELL, so apologies. So that's all right, I'm proud of it. So if you hover over each one of the lines, you will see our explanation of what you're supposed to receive. So I asked the team, what were the most frequent questions around calendar of events? And believe it or not, one of the most frequent questions was, when it says district received printed reports, what am I gonna get? And we said, well, printed reports. So now we try to be a little more specific of what that means. So please make sure that when you have your colleagues asking you, okay, what am I supposed to get on this date? Well, just ask them to hover over the line. And hopefully that'll answer your question and it'll be less need to contact us. Thank you. I will gladly take the credit, but that was all Whitney. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I also heard your concern about the time. Sometimes during administration, it takes a while to get a hold of for student assessment staff. I get it. I worked there. I worked there when we was 90 of us, and I worked there when it's quite a few less of us. So we needed to find creative ways to reach out to you. So we're going to launch our help desk, and I want to introduce also Vincent Salas. Is he here? Yes, there he is in the back. Stand up, come on. Vincent Salas is our new communications manager. We're very excited that he joined the team. He's helping us launch this initiative. And basically, this is a regular customer service ticketing system. So when we'll be able to send us your question in writing as a ticket, and we will return as soon as possible. Again, it's just an addition. It's not replacing anything yet. This is just an additional way to contact the agency, and it's our initial best effort to react to the concern of you having to wait too long for an answer or not getting a response from our limited staff. And like I mentioned, I already gave you a little taste, but there are many improvements that we made to our district coordinator resources. We added a section on how to navigate it. The biggest request by far is, Jose, can I print the whole thing at once? Yes, you can. Have you seen it yet? Oh, that deserves a clap, come on. So, just in case if you didn't know yet, these 3 dots give you your menu of options, right? If you follow these options, you are allowed to, it will let you download a PDF of the whole thing. But what I really like is that it's a smart PDF. All the links are workable, so you can share it through email with your colleagues. And even it will index it for you, so they can just jump to individual sections. I feel like this is coming and going. Okay? Another big improvement we've made, again, based on our conversations, it was a little challenging to navigate, I get it. So we're adding some quick navigation tools, right? So if you're worried about the district training coordinator responsibilities for TELPAS Alternate, when it's supposed to scroll in all, let's just go there. There are many other improvements that we are going to make sure that they're included under the What's New section. Again, partnering with our TSNAP colleagues, we ask you what was the best way to, what was the right frequency to update this document, because what I don't want you to is to wait for us for an update if we have the information ready, right? So my hope is that we will have one big update at the end of the fall, one big update at the beginning of the spring, but if there's a need to make updates, we're gonna make sure to announce them within the communications that we send every other week. I think it's working fine. Thank you, though. But anyway, anything we do to this document will always be documented here under What's New. But I want to be super clear, because some of you have called me on this. This is where the repository of our PDF manuals, I don't consider this an update. It'll be silly for me to wait until the end of the fall to post the manual in PDF if I have it ready. So these are going to populate as we have them ready. As a matter of fact, there's a couple that should be there already. Okay? So yes, this will not be part of the What's New, because again, I don't want you to have to wait until a full big update launch before you can have the manuals you need, okay? Test administration manuals. Again, now that we are fully lined up with the school year calendar, according to our calendar of events, again, you will be getting all your manuals early so you can be prepared and decide on what is the best way to distribute them on your own. Remember last year we shipped EOC earlier. Now you will have all your manuals so you can plan. You have more time to plan your training around it. The TELPAS manuals. Last year, we learned that there was a higher demand for printed manuals. Now, I'm sure you'll understand, we all live now on a land of limited resources, so we have a different approach. Being that raters do not need a hard copy manual, the rater manual will be available online only as a PDF. That's gonna let us print a few more test administrator manuals for TELPAS. And what we're going to ask you now is to let us know how many you need, and we'll ship them directly to the campus. Okay? How many you need within reason. And yesterday, Michael showed us how to do that. And at the end of today, during that session, we'll also remind you how you can order your test administrator manuals. And as I mentioned, all manuals will be available on the DCCR once they're ready. I'm almost on, I promise. This is my last slide. Training. This is very important to me. We've never had this many webinars. This year we have, and there's a couple missing that we're still going to add. So we are trying to provide all the information you need. Now, it's unreasonable for you to be able to attend all those live, right? Sometimes I don't either. So why would you do it if I don't have to do it? However, they're all recorded and they're all posted. And we were looking yesterday at the numbers with Lauren, and it seems that there is a disconnect for how many people register to how many people attend or watch it later live. We have about a 60% chance. I guarantee you that all the questions you have are captured there. So please remind your folks that these are always available for them to watch or rewatch the recordings. And some of them are really good, especially when you can't sleep. So let's go to menti.com and let's enter that code. And I'm gonna look for Michael because I'm sure I'm gonna mess this up. Hello? Is this better? Apparently you were all hearing me breathe and it bothers Glenn. Yeah, are we ready? Yeah, let's start it. Thank you, sir. All right, so first questions. Are districts able to administer online versions of the STAR Grade 8 Science and Social Studies on the same date as the paper version according to our calendar? Hey, all right, good job. It's gonna get harder, I promise, just like the test. Just like a STAR, we start with the easy questions. Give it up for Chris Cordell. Thank you for always putting me on the spot, sir. All right, so let me introduce my colleague, Julie Guthrie. She's going to walk us through our test security update.
I will be talking about the test security updates because, as Jose mentioned, we've had some changes in the agency and the division, and security is now under policies, which is me. So in case you haven't noticed, we have revised the security section in the coordinator manual. Basically, all the same information is there. It's just organized in a different manner, hopefully a better way. But if you have comments or concerns, please let me know because we can continue to modify it, either small changes and let you know about those changes, or for next year. Happy to hear your suggestions on how it's organized and what else you would like. The overview provides just the general information about what is test security and confidentiality, how do you maintain that for secure test materials, technology use, things like that. Then it goes into a section on testing irregularities and identifies the different types of irregularities, which I'll go into detail. Thank you, Glenn. And it clearly outlines all the penalties, as well as how to investigate and report security incidents. And then we have the section that you guys liked in the test security supplement about things to consider before, during, and after. And the updated security forms, or actually all security forms are there. So when we talk about the testing irregularities section, it lists the serious irregularities. It lists those that are referenced now in the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 101.3031. It lists the procedural ones, but groups them a little bit differently than you've seen in the past. It groups accommodation ones, monitoring ones, eligibility, other, and maintaining secure materials or accounting for them. It also talks about student cheating, what to do about that, because that is a type of irregularity. It has a section about what's not a testing irregularity, and the previous section from the security supplement about how to avoid testing irregularities. For the penalties, if you're not familiar with the penalties, there's lots of different references to different codes, whether they're state statute or administrative codes about what types of penalties. They're all in the penalty section of the DCCR, but they include invalidating test results, referring to the State Board of Educator certification. It's also a Class C misdemeanor. If you didn't know that, that's in the law. We can certainly work on work with other divisions in our agency to lower accreditation status or accountability ratings, depending on the type of severity, as well as charter sanctions or revocation. We mentioned the online incident report form is also being updated to reflect some of the new way to categorize the testing irregularities. You'll be asked about if it's a serious one or not, and if it's tampering, assistance, etc. And if it's a procedural, is it one of those 5 categories? Is it an eligibility issue? Is it an accommodations issue, etc.? Remember, for the serious violations, besides the online incident report that you're required to do and the investigative summary and plan of action, you also need to submit those witness statements so we know who said what and when. Okay, the revised security oaths. We heard you, and we heard that you didn't like what we did last year, put them all into one. We tried to simplify it, but I think we oversimplified it and made it confusing. So we separated them out, but there's not 9 like there were in the past. There's only 3. There's the Superintendent and Chief Administrative Officer oath, the District Testing Coordinator oath, and then the general oath for anybody else and everybody else who's involved in testing. The superintendent and DTC oath are the ones that are online, like it was last year, where you just fill out everything online, you can sign it online, and then you hit the submit form, because those are the ones that need to be returned to the agency through our contractor. The general oath is a fillable PDF. You can just print out the plain PDF and pass it around to everybody, or they can go online and fill out and then print it or send it to you electronically. And that's for everybody else. So yeah, there's 3 different ones. They're already posted. They were just posted late last week. So if you haven't seen the new oaths, they're up there now. Let's do a quick check for understanding. Remember, it's timed, so we want you to put in your responses. If you don't know, which one do you think it would be? Make an educated guess. Yay, 88% of you, that's right. The Superintendent and Chief Administrative Officer oath, as well as the DTC, is submitting online, because those are the ones we're required to maintain. The general oath is something that you keep locally. So it is the one that doesn't need to be submitted online, and that's one of the problems you guys had last year, is your teachers wanted to go and hit that submit button all the time. So we fixed that for you.
Okay, I'm gonna need to have a word with 13 people here.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, that worked. Okay, moving on to the more specific policy updates. So we've had lots of changes because we've had a legislative session that just concluded in June. It hasn't happened in a while, but there were several bills passed that affected the assessment program. Usually we only get 1 or 2. This year we got a handful of them. So we're going to walk through some of them really, really quickly. Again, the information is on the slides, and you can look at them later or talk to me about them during the break. So everybody should be familiar with House Bill 3, a huge sweeping reform on education policies. If you have any questions about House Bill 3, there's links there. You can send them information. Only a small part of House Bill 3 affects the assessment program, but I know it affects education in general. And if you haven't seen those HB 3 and 30, they are really good videos to give you quick snippets of information about changes coming from House Bill 3. The one piece of House Bill 3 that did affect the assessment program is requiring us to do a study of the STAR assessments for grades 3 through 8 to look at their alignment and their readability. That study is in progress, and we will be reporting that out soon. House Bill 1244 has some changes to the U.S. history test, but not anytime soon. It does require us to include 10 questions from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services test on the U.S. history test. So we are still working on how that's going to look and how that's going to interact. But there are no changes to the U.S. history test for this year. Because of the development process that it takes, and in addition to other things that we want to talk through with our technical advisory committee as well as our social studies educators, we are working on implementation this year and potentially changing it next year. But remember, no changes this year. Senate Bill 213 provided some great relief for graduating seniors or seniors that may not be graduating. It allows them to possibly graduate. It changed some effective dates of provisions from September of 19 and extended them through September of 2023. Those are the use of the TSI assessment and circumstances, the individual graduation committee, and the tax district decision. So based on those changes, we are updating our substitute assessment rule, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We have updated our STAR graduation requirement rule. It was posted for public comment, and it should be effective October 15th. By the way, I just heard back from the rulemaking division to check my dates, and this is one of the dates that they told me has changed. They were able to push this rule forward. So what's on your slides is not accurate. It's changed the effective date to October 15th. I apologize for that last minute update. The same thing is true with the tax graduation requirements, allowing those students to graduate through a district decision. That rule is effective October 15th, not November 4th, I think is what the slide originally said. Okay, House Bill 3906 is one of the biggest pieces of legislation that has passed in recent history that affects the assessment program. And there's lots of components of it. Some of you have heard of and read about different pieces, and we will be publishing information on our website about the different pieces in the near future. But one of the pieces requires us to convene an educator advisory committee to advise the agency on the development of the assessments. And certainly there's lots of new pieces that House Bill 3906 has added, and all of those pieces will be discussed and get input from this Educator Advisory Committee. We did send out nominations or requests for nominations, and the commissioner is currently, as far as I know, looking at those appointments, and we'll notify those individuals soon. Jose touched on this. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit more. Another piece of House Bill 3906 required us to not administer STAR assessments on the first instructional day of the week. So many people have called and asked if it applies to our other programs. No, it doesn't apply to STAR Alternate 2. It doesn't apply to TELPAS or TELPAS Alternate. The law specifically reference the STAR sections, both 3 through 8 and end of course. So we have updated our calendars, as you saw, and we are working on updating our rule to specify that the first instructional day of the week for this law will be Monday. Of course, some people have asked, well, what if you're off on Monday and the first day's Tuesday? What if you're off on Tuesday and the first day's Wednesday? What if you're off? I mean, you got to test at some point. Sorry, it's the law. So, but as Jose mentioned, we have had some questions about the June, and so we put some clarifying information on the last version of the calendar that's posted. If you're no longer providing instruction to students, if your summer school session has ended for the summer, and then you come across the June testing that last week of June, then this rule does not apply. You do not have to avoid testing on Monday if you're no longer providing instruction, if your session is no longer being held. That doesn't mean you can test necessarily English 1 and English 2 on that Monday. You have to submit a change request. But it does mean you can test Algebra 1, Biology, or US History. So we have a rule that was updating that and clarifying that. It actually just came down from public comment last week and should be effective December 2nd. House Bill 3906 also allows us to offer the STAR assessments in multiple parts. We are talking with educators, we're talking with our advisory committee, we're going to gather input from the educator advisory group to determine what that might look like and how we can chunk out the assessments into different parts. So the multi-part assessment, we hope to make it an option to districts during the next school year, not this school year. 2020 and 2021. Multiple choice questions. We are required to limit our assessments to not more than 75% of the questions in a multiple choice format. Again, we are working with educators. We talked to some of them in the Teacher Institutes this summer. We'll continue to work with them to gather information on what kind of items would best assess the curriculum in a non-multiple choice format, and hopefully roll those out at some point in the future. If you haven't recognized the theme here, most of these changes are in the future because we need some time to think through it, to ask you guys what you think, to seek input from our advisory committees, our technical committees, to make sure that our assessments are appropriate. Standalone writing test. The law, House Bill 3906, eliminates the standalone writing test in the 21-22 school year. We will have them for the next few years, but we will no longer have the standalone writing test for grades 4 and 7, starting with the 21-22 school year. Again, that means there are no changes this year for grade 4 and 7 writing. Something out in the future. Electronic administrations. House Bill 3906 asks us to work with the board, the state board, to develop a transition plan to move assessments online, not later than the 2022-23 school year. Again, something we're looking at. We're trying to figure out what districts have. We're doing a study. We will make a recommendation by December 2020, and then the legislature will meet again and determine if they're going to keep that date or if possibly they need to extend it. This is something in the future, not happening now, not happening tomorrow. House Bill 3906 put the interim assessments into the Texas Education Code under 39023O. It also allows us to put together a pilot program to create some integrative formative assessments. Again, we will be working with educators to figure out what that looks like and what that means. So that is something at least a year out. Updates based on federal requirements. As you know, there's been some federal regulations that have come down, or decisions or determinations from the United States Department of Education that we are working with, both assessment and our colleagues in performance reporting. One of the biggest ones is with STAR substitute assessments. The federal legislation, and we've talked to them in lots of different ways. We've tried lots of different options. You can see all the different options in that communication at the link to work around this, but they're flat out saying no. So it requires that the same assessment be given to all students, and those results be included in the accountability. So a substitute assessments is not the same one. Therefore, they will not allow us to include it in accountability. I know that performance reporting talked about this a little bit yesterday if you were here. So beginning in December, substitute assessments cannot and will not be included in accountability. That doesn't mean you can't give them. That just means that your students who are taking a substitute assessment won't be counted for participation. So to meet this federal testing and accountability requirement, the students moving forward will need to take the STAR end-of-course assessment at least once prior to using a substitute assessment. Take it at least once means receiving a score, marking the document as score code S. Not A for absent, not O for other. That includes any version of marking the score code of S and submitting it for a score, even if that score comes back as a 0. So if they take it at least once and are not successful, then they can retake it, or they can choose to use a substitute assessment to meet their graduation requirements. So we do have a rule that will put that in place. It will be posted for public comment in a few weeks, and will be effective in January. This is another date that changed, and again, I apologize. Rulemaking has their procedures and processes, and they provide me the information. So this is the proposed effective date, but again, it's proposed, so it could change again, is January 26th, not January 2nd as was written on the slide. Okay, so what does this really mean? What this really means, and we've gotten lots of calls about it, is that our policy, our recommended policy where we're going for the 1920 school year is that the student has to sit for the test at least once before they can use the substitute assessment. There's no longer a bubble, so you're not going to be able to bubble it in. You just have to keep that documentation locally on your own. But this policy is not technically official until the rule that I just referred to is effective. And that effective date is January 26th of 2020. If it changes, you will know about it. Also, another hot topic when it comes to federal requirements is testing of accelerated students. We have put out a rule and retracted a rule. We've put out a couple different communications, and we asked the USDE for a waiver about the testing requirements for accelerated students. We are still working on it. We did make some progress in that we got some funding through the legislature to provide SAT and ACT to high school juniors or seniors at least once. And that will help because we will be able to use that for accountability, and those students will have a high school test to take. What we haven't worked out is the rest of the details and how we're going to make that happen. So that's what we will be working on this year. There are no changes for students for this year. Same as always. Students take their enrolled grade level assessment. That's always the default, unless they're receiving instruction in a higher level course and taking a higher level test that corresponds to that course. If not, they default back to their grade level. At this point, we are not recommending double testing. We are wanting students to take the most appropriate assessment that aligns with the instruction they're receiving when one exists. So, no changes this year. Changes are coming, potentially next year, but for this year, it's the status quo. All right, check for understanding.
So while we load the next question, I want to emphasize what Julie just said. The presentation we send, it's a draft as always, just so you can have something to follow along. Based on our conversations and some of the changes that Julie just mentioned, we'll be posting what will be the final very, very soon. That's the one you should use for your trainings.
I think we do have a question and answer session.
Mike, present.
Take a couple and pass them around. All right, so we have a question on the policy updates. What test does a student have who's receiving enrolled grade 6 who's receiving instruction in grade 7 for mathematics? What tests do they have to take this year? Grade 6, grade 7, or both? Grade 7, excellent, that is correct. They don't take their they don't have to take their enrolled grade level because they're receiving instruction above grade level and there is a corresponding test to take. I believe,
See, there's no need to call the office.
did nobody ask or put oh yes, nobody did the double testing, good job. Okay.
That was a joke. You are always welcome your calls. This is accessibility updates. So, accessibility, as you know, Texas has a very strong, I'm very proud of Texas policy towards accessibility on assessments. Lucky for us, this is sort of a calm year for accessibility policy. There are not any major updates. We took this year to clean up and improve some of our policies. I saw the dance. So let's go briefly to what is new. A quick refresher. Accessibility policy for our assessments in Texas falls in 3 categories, right? Accessibility features, what anyone can do without documentation, what a student uses that can help them, please go ahead and do it, no need to document. Designated supports that you can decide on at the local level, and designated supports that require TEA to approve or not, right? On the first bucket, the accessibility features, nothing has come in or come out, it's the same thing as last year, but based on your request, we added some text to provide additional guidance on what a small group is. Because the questions were starting to get a little out of there. Clearly, if you have a regular classroom of 22 students and you want to test 30 of them, that is not a small group. By definition, it cannot be larger than the regular class, right? Now, many of you have asked me for a number. And it will be unreasonable to provide a number of what is a small group, because a small group is targeted to a need. And that need is going to vary by the student. Small group can be an individual administration. A small group can be a 5, 6, or 15 if they have their own headsets and they don't interfere with each other. That's what you need to work with your local committees to define what is the appropriate size. But we added a couple of bullets to help you with some language that you can use when you have your campus coordinators who wants to put everyone on the gym and test and call it a small group. Content and language supports update. Beginning with this spring 2020, if a child is getting content and language supports for a writing test, we're no longer providing pre-reads on revising sections. Now, why? Because now, since last year, we allowed students to get the whole revising selection read out loud. So why add them to read even more, right? The way to address the reading difficulty is by having the students get access to text-to-speech or a human reader so they can hear the whole revising section. Editing will still have a pre-read because we will never be able to allow the editing section to be read out loud because it's full of mistakes. That's the whole task, right? They need to correct the mistakes. How would you read out loud the mistakes? And the last big update for accessibility is the authority to for decision for LPACs. Back in a little bit of background, in 2017, we caught up with the rest of the nation to provide one general assessment for all populations and provide accommodations, right? We did away with the star L, we did away with the star A. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose any of the possibilities of accommodations that were already there. So we allow LPACs to recommend many designated supports where they really is not their business, right? Because an LPAC committee should only make recommendations of accommodations based on the student's progression of acquiring a second language, right? So why would an LPAC committee have to recommend math manipulatives? It has nothing to do with their job. So we went back to what is the main responsibility of the LPAC committee. So the LPAC committee by themselves can only recommend extra time, content and language supports, and oral and sign administrations, because those are directly tied to supports that a child needs when they're learning a second language. Now, again, if you happen to have a student who is an EL, but also has a 504 committee or an RTI or an R committee, well, the LPAC has to be present because they need to make decisions together, right? What we're saying is that by itself, an LPAC can only recommend those 3. Another big update. Well, not big, sort of big. We are trying to reduce the amount of contacts you and your coordinators need to have in order to get your issues, your problems solved. This is a very good example. If a child is taking a Braille or a refreshable Braille test, and they also need content language supports, of course we're going to approve that, right? So why make you go through the whole process of sending an email to our staff having to respond, then we need to let Whitney's team know to send you. So no, if you're taking if your students are taking a Braille or refreshable Braille and they need content language supports, contact the support center directly and they'll send you your materials. So one less step for you to worry about, okay? Oh, thank you. Do you notice that I was waiting? Thanks. Another change for Braille. When you need Braille with embedded support, there's always the need to make additional accommodations to those graphics, right? Your Braille educators are going to have to preview those materials and do whatever accommodation is appropriate for that child. Well, that takes time. So in the past, we were saying, all right, so the day of the test, you have to accommodate it, you have to give it meaningfully to a child that most likely is going to get extra time. Well, that makes no sense. So we met this summer and tried to find solutions, and we're providing some guidance that within your scheduled window, we're allowing your test administrator to have a preview of tests so they can prepare the materials. Now, this is going to get a little tricky when there are multiple subjects. So what we want you is define on which week you're giving which test, and within that week, your test administrator can preview those materials to prepare it. If they want to do all of it on Monday, fine. If they want to do it one subject today, after you administer, you accommodate the next subject, fine. This is going to be confusing because it's the first year we're doing it. You know what we do if we're trying to find guidance? Give me a call. Let's solve it together, okay? But be aware now that if a child needs content and language supports accommodated for a Braille administration, you can preview it with more time than we used to have. No applause on that one, huh? So just a reminder of what your accessibility features are. I'm not going to go into it because, like I said, nothing went in or out of the list. These two bullets are the language that we added to remind you that a small or individual group administration should be determined at the local level based on the needs and should mirror as much as possible the same accommodation you do in your classroom testing, right? So if for your math test, you have a small group of 5 students, and then you said, oh no, for a start, it needs to be individual, then why? That's not routine. How can you determine that that's going to improve their performance if that's not what they're used to? If anything, it may hinder it because it's something new the day of the test. This is a request that you guys have, and we also send this language to many of you, and I thank you for your feedback, because this is all encompassing what you recommended the text should be. Just a quick reminder that if a child is taking a grade 4 writing test on the computer, they are allowed to use basic transcribing. There's no eligibility to be met because at grade 4, the students are not required to be proficient in typing. Here's where the common confusion comes. This is only for grade 4. If it is grade 7 or up and they need basic transcribing, they need to meet criteria and the appropriate committee has to make the recommendation. Again, like I mentioned, locally approved designated supports, there's no change. We have our 14 guidance documents. They're all organized in the same fashion. They all follow the same order, so we try to make it easier on you. And by your request, on our website, and I think on the DCCR also, we have them all as one PDF if you want to download all of them and pass it around to your campuses. As you notice, we are now able to post this way earlier on the DCCR because it's automatically accessible. The problem with posting on our site is it takes forever to make them accessible. So we're trying, whenever we can, to post directly to DCCR so you have the information and you have the accessible version on our website following, okay? These are the list of designated supports. Again, there's no change on the types, so I don't think I'm gonna spend much time on this list. You know you can find it on our site and of course on our DCCR. No changes on basic transcribing, just a few reminders that you can use during your trainings. I know it seems like I'm going super fast, but the reality is that there are no updates here. I just want you to have the content so when you build your own trainings, you can just borrow from this deck, okay? Calculation 8, no changes again. I do want to make a reminder though, and this is calculators in general. We are aware of the increasing applications that are out there that are very helpful for instruction, and some of them are marketed with what they call testing mode. Just because it's labeled testing mode, believe me, it's not. So please check it with your math people, because if that device is providing direct answers, it is not allowed. And when you use a device that is not allowed, the test is subject to invalidation. This is the reminder, the update that I just told you about for Refreshable Braille, that if you are taking Braille or Refreshable Braille and the child needs content language support, you no longer need to go through us. Just ask our vendor to ship you the materials directly, okay? And this is, again, the previous update tied to Braille, that you are allowed to preview those materials if you need to build additional accommodations for all those graphics included on the admin guide and on the test. Oh, quick check for understanding. Julie, which one's your water? All right. For students taking a writing test with content language support, what is a change for this year? People, come on. Okay, so what is the change for this year? Revising passages will no longer include pre-reads. It's the first option. Revising passages will be read out loud. That was implemented last year. That's not new. Editing passages will not be read out loud. They have never been or never will be, because they have mistakes. I don't know how we will read out loud the mistakes. So now you understand the need for retests. Too low, too low. You see, I thought about it, but it was already out. All right. Content language supports, like I said, there is no change to the actual policy implementation. The change is on the authority for decision. Okay? Reminder of how pre-reads, the question that half of you just missed. Oral administration. There's a couple of cleanups on oral administration. We added to the oral administration guidance, not the policy document. We added some examples on how to address pre-reads, because based on your feedback, we needed to beef that up. And also a new update for oral and sign administration for writing tests. Last year, based on your concerns on how will my teacher know when to stop reading or revising from an editing, we added individual covers to each section of the booklet, right? That was a great attempt. I think it helped, but we could do more. So this year, we're also going to have individual footers on those pages, footers. So when, footers, again. So when they are reading the items, they will see at the bottom of the page if it is a revising section that they're allowed to read, or it's an editing section where they should not read, okay? I didn't ask for that one, but thank you. All right, so oral admin. This was also changed last year, but I want to remind you that oral administration, an LPAC can recommend it on its own. We know that because if you are learning English, this is probably one of the most frequent accommodations you will need. But that doesn't mean that they can recommend it for a Spanish test unless the child has a reading difficulty, right? Because LPAC should recommend oral administration for a student whose English is their second language and they're still learning it. If you're taking the test in Spanish, because that's your native language, well, taking the test in Spanish is your accommodation. So there's no second language factor that should allow you to have it read out loud. If you need the Spanish read out loud, then you're not proficient in Spanish. Unless you have a reading difficulty, that's when an art on a 504 committee should recommend it. Does that make sense? Yes. I'm liking this. Like I mentioned, we beef up the guidelines a little bit. I'll do it on time. Oy. This again is just for you to use during your trainings. There are no changes to our approach to ASL videos. If you know, we launched last year the form with ASL videos online for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. It was very well received, so I thank you for giving it a chance. Again, no changes in the policy. Just remind your people that it's out there and we should take advantage of it because it was a great effort to put all this together. Spelling assistance, there is no change on spelling assistance. The policy is just like it was last year. And of course, the final set of accommodations are the ones that require approval. And you all know Catherine Stapleton, she runs this for our team. We are ready to launch the new form. It's a little bit delayed. I think first we promised October 1st, but it will be within the next few days. Because again, we're trying to make this easier for you so you can get answers as fast as you can when you need it. So there are some cases when you don't need to wait for an answer. So we're trying to train our form and our system to send an automatic reply when you provided all the information instead of have to wait for us. That's what has delayed the form a little bit. But hopefully you will understand it's a good thing, I promise you. It's gonna reduce the amount of points of contact you need to get your answers and your issues solved. Same as always, please, when you do your trainings, reminding of the correct process. You should always, district coordinator should always know when your schools are requesting something. The system will send you an email, and we will not approve something without having the district testing coordinator be involved, okay? Likewise, by the way, when your campus coordinators call me, I always give you a courtesy call, because to me, that is the right way. You should know what your schools are requesting. Because most of the time when they call me, it's something that easily would have been solved at the local level if they would have called you first. Oh, this is one that I want to spend some time, because there's another enhancement that we're making, our special administration request. So there are certain cases, TELPAS, listening and speaking, TELPAS reading, and of course, start with accommodations are online, are designed to be online, but there are a very small number of cases when a child cannot interact with an online system for many reasons, right? And we ask you to send a request. But just like with the accommodations, there are some cases where we are never going to get in the way. Of course, we're going to approve it. So why make you wait? So we're improving that form so that if you certify the right information, you get an automatic approval or denial, and you don't have to wait for us to make a judgment or to call you, yeah, can you beef up the rationale because I don't understand? No. If we approve it last year and nothing has changed on the student situation, why are we going to get in the way? So all we need to do is document it so we can track the information to improve the program, but you will get your response right away, okay? And the form, it's housed on our DCCR. I don't believe it's live yet. I couldn't make it for today, but it will be very, very soon. Again, it's a little delayed because we're working on those efficiencies so you can get automatic responses when there's really not a need for us to be in the way. Just a reminder of the big change for accessibility this year. It is the restriction of the authority for decision for LPACs. And to remember, if this is a reading or writing test and an LPAC recommends oral administration, content language supports, or extra time same day, well, you cannot exit that student at the end of the year. And it makes sense, right? Our tests are in spring and late spring. If we're saying that Jose needs content language support in May, how is he ready to exit 2 weeks after? It doesn't make any sense. So that's why the restriction, if you're gonna recommend this, remember there is an impact, because that means the student still needs services. This is the language that we added last year to address RTI committees, a few guidelines on it. Likewise for 504, likewise for art. Ooh, one more and we'll go to break, I promise. Well, it depends on how you answer. All right, for which 3 accommodations are LPAC committees allowed to recommend without input from any other committee? And I'm not going to read you the list. Just want to remind you that I just said it. Okay. We'll call that meet standard. No, that'll be 100%. Come on, this was easy. You want masters? A gold star for everybody. All right. So just a few slides on our tutorials. Again, I'm not going to cover this. This is just meant for you to use during your individual trainings.